Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap, we have two game ones of the second round in the books. I wasn't particularly happy with either result, especially the Celtics one, as the Celtics really struggled in their loss to the Bucks, losing 101-89. That actually wasn't as close as, that looks to be closer than the game actually felt.
Mhm.
So let's start with the Celtics series. And we previewed this already. We've talked a lot about what their matchup is like against the Bucks, but I guess let's start with game one, Sap, and your opinions on what went wrong, and then I'll tell you what I thought went wrong.
Well, there were a couple of things, Jed. First of all, I think I might be the only person, along with maybe Brian Scalabrine, that didn't have a major problem with the 53-point field goal attempts. They hit 18 of them, which is 36%, which is slightly above league average. Milwaukee's going to bait you into taking threes. We talked about that in our preview, and the Celtics took threes. They took 50 of them, hit 18 of them, 36%, which isn't all that bad. The problem was they were 10 of 34 on 2-point field goal attempts, and they were 2 of 23 when contested inside a 2-point territory. Again, a lot of people are going to blame the Celtics for not showing up or not being ready or not being intense enough. Maybe that was part of it, but the other thing was it was a step up in class, especially defensively with the Milwaukee Bucks. There was no resistance by the Brooklyn Nets against the Celtics in that first round series, a series that the Celtics swept, although by only 18 total points in the 4 games. Milwaukee was a different animal yesterday. We just saw it. They play outstanding defense. They actually have a coach, and Mike Budenholzer, who makes adjustments throughout the games. And we saw that after the 10-minute mark when he started putting more pressure on the Celtics defensively, picking them up three-quarter court and kind of getting the Celtics out of their offensive rhythm, something that Brooklyn never even attempted to do in those 4 games. The other thing, which I think is telling, is that the Bucks had 14 turnovers. Half of them were in the first 6 minutes of the game. They had 14 turnovers, and the Celtics only made them pay with 6 points off of those 14 turnovers. Meanwhile, the Celtics had 18 turnovers, and Milwaukee made them pay with 27 points. Now, part of that is Milwaukee's really good at getting back on defense, which the Celtics weren't yesterday. Part of that issue, Jason Tatum going to the basket, not having an easy path to the basket like he did against Brooklyn, getting blocked by Lopez or Giannis or missing a shot, and then decides he's going to bitch to the officials. Meanwhile, Milwaukee's going down the other end 5-on-4. Giannis is going downhill. Either he's going to the cup or he's hitting the spot-up shooters like Connaughton or Holiday or Allen, and the Celtics paid for that. So I think those were the two big issues. Those are things you can kind of clean up a little bit, but let's give some credit to Milwaukee. They're not the defending champions by accident.
No, absolutely not. And, I think that the biggest thing is what you sort of alluded to was the step up in competition for the Celtics. And going into game one, as a Celtics fan, I was not feeling very confident about it because I've seen this, happen hundreds of times in the playoffs that when you have an easy time with one opponent,
Mm-hmm.
you expect to be able to cruise in the next round. And the Celtics are facing a completely different animal in the Milwaukee Bucks, no pun intended. Eh, Milwaukee is bigger than Boston and they're stronger than Boston. Boston
Mm-hmm.
has the talent advantage in my mind, but Milwaukee played exactly the type of game they wanted to play in game one. And that's why I have more of a problem with the 53 Sep, is because that's exactly what Milwaukee wanted you to do. And yeah, the percentage it's not great, but it's not terrible. But you played the game Milwaukee wanted to play. And that was, I think, a bigger problem for the Celtics, is that they expected to be able to do the same things against Milwaukee that they did against Brooklyn. And there was no chance of that happening. Milwaukee is just as good as you defensively, in my mind, if not better. I know the metrics and stuff say that. Throw all those regular season stats out the window. Look at the personnel. Milwaukee is just as good, if not better, defensively as Boston. That's just true. They are more physical than you because
Mm-hmm.
they have those guys who are gonna muck it up and be more physical. That's the nature of their team. They're extremely confident. They know what it takes to win a championship. And so I thought that the Celtics played their game, which contributed to it. I tweeted this out too. I thought even though Milwaukee didn't shoot a great percentage from three, Sap, they shot 35% from three. They missed a lot of good looks. And so people are saying, oh, the Celtics missed a lot of good looks. They could shoot a higher percentage. True, but so can Milwaukee. And I think the Celtics, what I said going into the series, Sap, was the Celtics need to focus less on Giannis and more about the role players, because Giannis is going to get his numbers. Heck, Giannis didn't shoot well at all yesterday, and he put up a triple-double. They had too many guys just wide open shooting threes. Grayson Allen is a really good 3-point shooter. He had six attempts. He hit 3 of them. All 6 of them, I would venture to guess, were wide open looks. They didn't do a good job trying to key in on those other players, and they let the ball pressure and defense of Milwaukee completely dictate what they wanted to do on offense. I thought they settled for a lot of bad looks early in the shot clock. Once they went down, they started to only think about shooting threes. Like again, Seb, I have no problem with shooting threes in today's NBA, but I don't think it should always be looked at as the first option. And I think too often the Celtics were looking at it as this is the first, second, and third option is to shoot a three. And in the second half of the game, didn't really even attempt to take the ball to the basket. And I know Lopez is an imposing figure in there, but you got to at least make Milwaukee think that you're going to try to, put the ball in the paint and make an effort to do that. So I think there's a lot of adjustments for the Celtics to make, both offensively and defensively. And, this is the first time in the postseason that Ime Udoka has had to do that. So we will see how he does. I think the Celtics have the talent advantage, but Milwaukee showed that they are up to the task equally, if not better, defensively, and also going to be more physical than you, and they have more height than you. So it's not going to be easy. I know people were saying Middleton's out, the Celtics should be able to win the series. I agree that they should, but it definitely shouldn't be easy, and it's not going to be.
No, I thought it was laughable when I heard people say Celtics in 5. This should be fairly easy. I mean, Milwaukee is much better defensively than Brooklyn, and they have a hierarchy there with Giannis as the leader. And then another player like Drew Holiday, who may have been the best player on the court yesterday, he put up 25, 10, and 5 and played great defense like he always does. I mean, you can make a case he had even a better day than Giannis, although Giannis really controls the game because even though he was 9 of 25 from the floor, an inefficient day for Giannis, 13 rebounds, 12 assists. He sets up those shooters because you're so concerned with him, which again, maybe if Giannis goes and gets 40 but only has 3 or 4 assists, maybe that works out better for the Celtics. We'll have to see what happens. Giannis is good enough to do both, though. Giannis can still get you 40, 15 rebounds and 10 assists. I mean, he like LeBron James in his prime, dictates what takes place on the court at both ends of the court. The thing is, too, when you look at the Celtics, again, 10 of 34 on 2-point attempts, can you look more to the mid-range game? Are there some things that they can do, like Jason Tatum, rather than going all the way to the cup, and he's going to face Brook Lopez and Giannis? Is there some sort of availability to the mid-range game, which I know is taboo in the NBA today, although, teams still can be efficient there. I mean, Chicago had a nice year with DeMar DeRozan being very efficient in the mid-range. Kawhi Leonard has won titles being a deadly mid-range shooter. Kevin Durant's a deadly mid-range shooter. Chris Paul, that was the next name I was going to throw out there. Chris Paul wasn't taking all threes the other night when he went 14 for 14. In fact, he took one and hit one. So somewhere in the mid-range is important. But those turnovers that we talked about, killers, I mean, Jaylen Brown had 4 field goals and 7 turnovers. I mean, even Kevin Durant, who, seemed to have as many turnovers as field goal makes in the first 3 games of the Celtics series, looked at that and said, man, he's playing poorly. So Jaylen Brown has to step it up. Again, there's no easy path to the basket against Brooklyn, so you're not going to get any against Milwaukee. You're not going to get those easy looks. And I also found it laughable. And again, I think, most people, some of the people on the outskirts that cover the NBA in this city don't really spend as much time as we do actually watching and going through what we have to go through to try to be somewhat, sensible in our opinions. Brook Lopez was first team All-NBA on the defensive end a year ago. Like people said, I thought he was a stiff. No, he's a really good rim protector and also a pretty efficient 3-point shooter. He was outstanding in the postseason last year. He's an outstanding player. We know what Giannis can do defensively. Portis isn't a great defender, but he's so big and physical that you're going up against 3 trees in there. And then, I know Marcus Smart was Defensive Player of the Year. Drew Holiday is, to me, a more skilled version of Marcus Smart, right? Especially in the offensive end. He's a better shooter. That's a fair comparison. And again, I said the way Marcus Smart played the second half of the year reminded me of Dennis Johnson, which is an incredible compliment. And I'll say the same thing about Drew Holiday. His game is a lot like Dennis Johnson's. It's not a pretty looking shot, but the thing goes in. And it seemed like every time the Celtics would try to make a run yesterday, Jet, he was the guy with the big shot, whether it was a 2, a 3, a follow-up, whatever. He was, again, make the case that he was the best player on the floor yesterday. So that's what I'm going to ask you, though, is that available in the mid-range where Tatum and Brown, maybe if they can break someone off the dribble, get to the mid-range and shoot? The only problem with that is, again, in comparison to Brooklyn, it's not easy to break Milwaukee down off the dribble because who's on these guys? Drew Holiday, an all NBA defender. So it's not like, Jaylen Brown in the Brooklyn series had who on him? Kyrie Irving and some Blake Griffin? Like, he laughed at that. You're not laughing at Drew Holiday.
No, they're very hard to take off the dribble, and they all swarm defensively, and they're all really smart defensive players, and they're a long team too. So they're getting deflections, which you saw a lot. Jaylen Brown was awful yesterday, awful. It almost looked like he had like grease on his hands, like the ball was slipping out, like he was kicking it off his own foot. Like nothing was going well for Jaylen Brown. He didn't do anything really well at all. So they're going to need a lot more from him. But yeah, sure. I think the mid-range should be available. They should certainly be willing to do it. Again, this goes back to me saying that they played Milwaukee's game completely. And that what I mean also by that is, when you take 53s, Milwaukee knows what you're doing on offense. So you gotta try to become a little less predictable. And that was a big problem, Sap. Remember, Marcus Smart was saying that early in the season when the Celtics were struggling, is how predictable their offense was. And that's, a big part of why they were losing so many games, is that teams knew exactly what they wanted to do. So, the Celtics need to throw different things at Milwaukee. They can't just say, we're going to shoot 53s, and Milwaukee will go, okay, whatever. That we know what you're going to do. We'll try to stop it. You're not going to try to do anything else, so we don't really have to worry about anything else. I just thought the Celtics went away from, because they were getting challenged at the rim, they went away from it too quickly, and you need to keep trying to play the games, the type of game that got you to this point, and don't just adjust. Don't play Milwaukee's game because you feel like that's the only thing you can do. You got to keep trying to push your style of basketball. That's what Milwaukee did in game 1. And that's, why they won. They completely played their brand of basketball. And I think also, Sap, what we alluded to at the beginning of this is, going into it, Milwaukee, the step up in competition, I don't think fazed them because, again, they won a title. So it wasn't going to be a big issue for them stepping up from playing the Bulls to the Celtics because, they know what the best teams already look like. I don't think there was a degree of with the Celtics, Sap, of I think once they swept Brooklyn and they were playing so well in the second half of the season where they're just like, we can't do anything wrong. We're going to just go in and we'll be able to do what we want. And Milwaukee, I think, knows better at this case and at this, point in Giannis's career and stuff like that. And so I think they just came into the game and said, we're going to see what Boston gives us at first. We'll be able to adjust to it. And they did. And the Celtics, I think, just assumed that they were going to be able to play Milwaukee like they did against Brooklyn. And I don't know why they thought that, other than they were just in the mindset of we can do no wrong.
Here's another thing too, Jed. The Celtics had a 24-17 lead with 2 minutes left in the first quarter. And that's when Budenholzer had called the timeout and started to adjust on defense, picking up the ball handler, three-quarter court, putting more pressure on the Celtics offense. So Milwaukee outscores the Celtics 10-0 the final 2 minutes of that first quarter. So when the quarter ends, now it's Milwaukee 27, Boston 24. And you felt like for the first 10 minutes, the Celtics were playing pretty well, outplaying Milwaukee, yet Milwaukee has a 3-point lead. Then you kind of spar back and forth in the second quarter. What happens over the last 3 minutes of the second quarter? Milwaukee outscores you 11-3. That's a total of 21-3 over the final 2 minutes of the first quarter, final 3 minutes of the second quarter. Those were huge, huge parts of the game. And then we go to the third quarter, Giannis picks up his fourth foul, goes to the bench. Tatum hits the 2 free throws. Now it's a 6-point game, right? At that point, Giannis is going to sit out the final 3:37 of the third quarter. You have to get back in that game. You're down 6. You have to tie it up or even take the lead going in the fourth quarter. Maybe that game is different. Instead, Milwaukee increases the lead to 8. Ball game over, because by the fourth quarter, I think Milwaukee just wore the Celtics out, being the bigger, more physical team. So they played really poor basketball the final 2 to 3 minutes of the first 3 quarters, and it caught up with them.
Yeah, that's a great point, Sap. Those minutes where Giannis was on the bench, and that's going to be something going forward for the Celtics too, that they're going to have to key in. Like, they can't lose those minutes. Period. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to come out with a in the plus minus column. You have to come out with a plus in those minutes where Giannis is out. He's not going to miss many minutes. It's possible he's going to get into foul trouble more games this series because he plays such an aggressive style. Mm-hmm. But you just absolutely, there's no way, shape, or form that the Celtics can win this series if they're losing those minutes where Giannis is out. So that's key for the Celtics, Sap.
So we're 15 minutes in. So let me give you my second LeBron James reference here.
Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to the 2018 finals. Cleveland against the Warriors with Durant, Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Iguodala. 4-0 sweep, right, by the Golden State Warriors. Do you realize when LeBron was on the court, Cavaliers actually outscored Golden State, but when he was off the court, it was so one-sided that Golden State swept Cleveland. I'm not saying it's going to be that dramatic or drastic for the Celtics that, you're going to have to absolutely pulverize the Bucks when he's on the bench, but you're going to have to outplay them. You're going to have to outscore them because he's that good. He's the best player in the world. And we've both agreed on this for a year plus now. And I now find it laughable when people go, yeah, now he's the best player in the world. Or they throw this backhanded compliment at him and say, yeah, he's the best two-way player in the world. Well, yeah. He's by far the best defensive player among the elite players, whether you want to talk about Durant, Jokic, even Embiid, Luka, LeBron, Curry, pick them all. I mean, if there's 7 or 8 guys, he's by far the best defensive player, right? And he's also the most relentless guy. I'm going to compare him a little bit to 3 all-time greats. And he got a little Moses Malone in him, where Moses Malone just scared the crap out of people because he just never stopped playing. His motor was at a different RPM than everybody else. Larry Bird was the same way. Michael Jordan was the same way. I mean, I'm comparing Giannis to 3 all-time greats in terms of his intensity and in terms of his motor. He's just a different cat. And right now, I think he's playing with a lot of confidence, knowing that he's a defending champ. He's looking for back-to-back titles. He is the best player in the world. And now there's some sort of maybe extra confidence and less hesitation in his game because he's kind of figured it out, right? Off day shooting yesterday, 9 for 25. Not a great day shooting. That's 36%, which would scare the Celtics if he comes out and has his usual, 13 of 18, which he's prone to do, but also 13 rebounds and 12 assists. That's what makes him the best player in the world. So I just look at that when he's on the bench, you better dominate those minutes. And they weren't able to do that at the end of the third quarter. So Milwaukee had an 8-point lead going into the fourth quarter. As a Celtic fan, don't you get the feeling that an 8-point lead by Milwaukee in the fourth quarter is a lot safer than a 14-point lead by Brooklyn going into the fourth quarter? Because Milwaukee's not going to let up. They're going to play defense, and they're going to have some good possessions on offense. And again, you went from going against the team that has 2 all-time great skilled guys who don't have quite the heart and determination or even close to what Giannis has, and isn't really a constructed team that's not even coached.
They're awful defensively.
And they're awful defensively. Yeah, there's no easy. I mean, again, it's almost got to be like if you're in football and you're going up against, a really bad defense out there and you're able to just run your offense and you can run the ball, play action, throw the ball downfield, you put up all the points in the world. And then the next thing you face in the 2000 Ravens with Ray Lewis, right? And they're just going to come at you and be physical with you and not going to give you any easy baskets. The Celtics didn't have many easy baskets. They had some good looks on threes that they missed. So you hope that in game 2 that they make some of those, but, easier said than done.
Yeah, and it's more than that, right? It's not just that they missed the easy ones. It was more into it than that.
Right.
And I think the last point about Giannis, Sap, before we move on to the next series to the Warriors Grizzlies, I'm getting really sick of people going, yeah, but with Giannis, when people say he's the best player in the world. I saw at halftime of the ESPN coverage, Stephen A. Smith said, "Oh, I don't want to go there," talking about the Giannis thing, and Jalen Rose seems a little opposed to talking about too. Like at this point, am I crazy to say it's at this point? Am I crazy to say it's undeniable? Like
it's not quite. It's not quite the gap that LeBron had over the field.
No, but
that's still sizable.
One of the generational. There's no other LeBron. That's not you can't point that out. It's not fair.
No, he's the best player in the league. He's the best player in the league. I don't even think it's that close.
How can you make a case for anybody else right now?
Right.
Really?
No, I don't get it. Again, if we're going to put into this discussion Durant and Embiid and Jokic and Luka, and we'll throw Tatum in there because Tatum can get in that discussion, and still, LeBron's in that discussion, and Steph Curry, whatever. How many guys you want to throw in the hell? Throw Chris Paul in because he's sensational. This guy's just different because on the defensive end, he is dominant. The guy's won Defensive Player of the Year just a couple of years ago. I think he was in the running this year.
He finished top 3.
Right there. So he's in the discussion as the best defensive player in the league. Almost
He'll
won the
make
scoring
first team
title.
all defensive, Sep. I mean, he's made it virtually every year.
He almost led the league in scoring. He's top 5 in rebounding, and now he's averaging close to 7 assists. Like, I don't know what more you want from the guy. He's durable. He plays his ass off. His teammates love him. He's a leader. I'm like,
is it because he can't shoot threes? Is that it?
Right. Yeah, that's okay. Fine. Neither did I don't think Will Chamberlain would have thrown up threes, or Kareem maybe would have learned to take threes because he was really skilled. However he gets it done, he gets it done. It's not aesthetically pleasing. I find it aesthetically pleasing because the guy just plays so damn hard. Like, and that's admirable. I mean, Durant's aesthetically pleasing. Kyrie's aesthetically pleasing. They're artists out there. Giannis is not an artist. He's just like a bulldozer, but that's his game. He plays to his strength. I don't get it.
There's more than one way to play basketball,
Exactly. There's a million different ways. I mean, LeBron, people would criticize as not being aesthetically pleasing. I mean, LeBron's his IQ's off the charts. Incredible passer. I mean, he's right there with Magic and the rest of the top passers in the history of the game.
Yeah.
And he could just do so many things. I mean, he's the human jack of all trades. So, but I think part of it is foreign born. He didn't come through like the AAU system. The guy was selling trinkets on the street with his family, 12, 13 years ago. And the Bucks found him, and he was 195 pounds, and he's worked so hard to develop his game and body. He's humble. He's charming. And it's just like, this guy almost seems too good to be true, but let's just watch the games. Again, he didn't have a very good game shooting the basketball yesterday, and he still was dominating. And that's when a great player shows he's a great player. And I think
he was toying with the Celtics at the end of the game. He threw the ball off the backboard and dunked it on them. That doesn't happen in a playoff game.
No, I saw LeBron do that against Golden State in the finals one time, and I saw Tracy McGrady do that in an All-Star game.
I remember the Tracy McGrady one. Yeah,
off a fast break, which is even more impressive. But then, again, it was an All-Star game. This guy's like, I'm just bigger, stronger, more ferocious than you. I don't get it. It really does piss me off. Like, I respect Stephen A. Smith.
Me too, Seth. That's pissing me off too.
It's like, just say this guy's the best player in the world. We've heard for the last 3 years that Kevin Durant is the greatest player in the world, who, by the way, in the last 3 years has played a grand total of 90 games. You got to show up at some point to be the best player in the world. Giannis shows up and busts his ass every night, and he's the defending champ. Like, I don't get it. Like,
I'm telling you, I think in my mind, Sap, and you've watched basketball for a long time. I've watched basketball for a long time. Like, I think that we're pretty unbiased about this, and we can take a real bird's eye view of the landscape of the NBA and look at it again. I'm going to use the same word. I think it's undeniable. I do not see.
I'm with you.
I don't see a case for somebody else over Giannis. I don't. I would like, because you know what? It would be more entertaining, honestly, on this show to debate it back and forth. Oh, is it Giannis? Is it this guy? So from our perspective, yeah, it would be great. But I'm telling you, I don't see a case for anybody else. It's him. It's clearly him.
Yeah, I mean, for a dozen years, it was clearly LeBron. And they would come out and say, well, Steph Curry's better, or this guy's better. And it's like, okay, those guys are great, but they're not better than LeBron. Now it's Giannis. It is. And
LeBron was whether you have him 1, 2, Skip Bayless has him at like 28. Wherever you have him in the top 5, because I
slightly behind Manu Ginobili. I think he's number 28.
Absolutely no question a top 5 player. I have him, in my top 5. Sep has him as 1 overall, but whatever.
I think at worst he's top 4. To me, the Mount Rushmore. This leads to another discussion. Is him, Jordan, Russell, and Kareem. To me, those are the 4 greatest players ever. Now, how do you compare Kareem and Russell to LeBron and Jordan?
Right,
and
I have
players,
no problem with that. But I'm saying that what makes LeBron unique is that he was the best player. And maybe this is a good discussion for the summer, Sap, when after basketball's over, who was the best player for the longest amount of times in the league. Like, what makes LeBron unique is he was the best player in the league for over a decade. Like, that doesn't happen.
He kind of
doesn't.
When did he?
And like Giannis, I think Giannis has been the best player for now a year and a half. And like maybe by the time next season's over, he's not anymore. But right now he is. And it's again undeniable. He's the best player in basketball. Period. There's not a discussion in my mind.
I don't get it. And if he repeats this year, what more do you want the guy to do? And everybody pushes back against Durant. I don't that much that he went to this ready-made championship team. Here's Giannis without Chris Middleton, his second best player right now. And Drew Holiday, we both love as a player, but he's like not an all-time great. I mean, I'm comparing it to Dennis Johnson.
All-star, right?
He's excellent player. And then a bunch of spot-up shooters. And here's Giannis just, going at it. I don't get it.
Sap cast-offs. It's not spot-up shooters even. Matthews, cast-off. Portis, cast-off. Lopez, cast-off. Grayson Allen, you know what? This maybe goes to Budenholzer too. He developed them well and found a role for them. But also, I mean, Giannis, again, if you're the best player, you mentioned setting the pace, Sap, and that's what he does. Like, he's figured out a way to get the most out of all these players. Is it aesthetically pleasing all the time? Not necessarily. It's not the same way Chris Paul gets other guys involved or LeBron, elevate these players. But when you're at the top of your craft and you're at the top of the league in the NBA, if you're that good, the other players around you are going to get good. Giannis makes the players around him better. Mm-hmm. He does. He's not throwing, behind the back passes or under the legs and stuff like that. That's not how he makes players better. He does it in a different way. And again, it's just to me now you're just being stubborn if you're not saying he's the best player in the league.
It's not quite to the degree, but I people say, well, I don't know if Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback ever. I'm like, what more do you want him to do to earn that title? I mean, Giannis isn't quite there yet because, like you said, I think he's been the best player in the world for a year and a half now, maybe 2 years. I think when LeBron won his 4th title, he was still the best player in the world. Heck, he was a world champion, a finals MVP who could do everything. Probably should have won the MVP that year, finished second to Giannis. So there you go. But the last 2 years, Giannis has been the best player in the world. I know that last year Jokic won the MVP. It's probably going to repeat this year. And as great as Jokic is he the defender that Giannis is? Hell no. It's not even close. Giannis scores more, rebounds just as well, and not far behind in terms of passing. It's different. Again, there's some artistry to his game where with Giannis, it's just like, I'm driving down the lane, but let me kick it out to my shooters. But you watch his passes, they're incredibly accurate. Guys don't have to make circus catches to regroup and shoot. He hits people right in the shooter's pocket.
And that's why the lights.
It's a strength. He's just relentless.
He's so strong. He can drive to the basket, throw it across his body. We talk about this with shortstops in baseball, right? A lot of it's arm strength. Like, can you go falling away? Can you make that throw to first base? And that
quarterbacks.
That's strength.
Same thing.
That's strength, and that's what he has. So, like, does the pass have to be beautiful? Like, throwing it, like I said, LeBron throwing it behind his back, Larry Bird, a little touch pass, Jokic, like, it's the same effect. If he's getting it where it's supposed to be,
long as it's accurate, and that's the thing. I mean, Russell Westbrook.
It's not the Globetrotters. Like,
no. And now we're 28 minutes into this, and let me attack Russell Westbrook. But even his assists are ugly because half the time I saw, like, so many times this year, Westbrook would get an assist, but the pass was bad. LeBron would have to, like, almost go into the stands to catch it, regroup, and hit a 3, and it's like, oh, Westbrook got an assist on that. It was a terrible pass. But back to this series that teams are actually playing in, not guys that are on vacation now for the last month. But I just push back because I just also think that the insiders kind of look at this guy as an outsider. Like, who the hell is this guy? Right? It's just like,
because they all missed on him in terms of prognosticating him.
Yeah, and then he signed with Milwaukee when everybody wanted him to go, well, he's going to leave as a free agent and go to the Knicks or wherever the hell he was going. His teammates love him. Hell, you hear the story yesterday, he took his entire team to Greece for 7, 10, 14 days. I mean, who does that? The guy is, I like, how could you not like this guy?
No, I don't. I'm rooting,
I don't get it.
The complete opposite of what the Nets series, Sap. Like,
right,
like every time KD or Kyrie touched the ball, I was like seething. I like Giannis. I can't root against him. I mean, I'm obviously rooting for the Celtics to win, but I'm not. I like the guy. He's awesome. He's a great guy. He's the best story in the NBA, in my opinion.
He's like a superhero too, isn't he? He's gonna get that superhero feel. He's got this, he's like grown in strength, and
it's the same thing that irritated me about why people wouldn't embrace Tom Brady. I know he's a little bit goofy and stuff like that, but like, look at the story. It's ridiculous. This stuff shouldn't happen. Where you're selling trinkets in Greece and now you're the best player, the basketball player in the world, or you're picked 199 and you are a backup in college and you become the best quarterback. Like, that stuff doesn't happen.
That's a great point, Jeff, because usually basketball, we could go through all the all-time great players. They were all high draft picks, right? I mean, obviously Kareem and LeBron were first overall.
They knew who they were.
They knew those guys were going to be great. Jordan went third, but we knew he was going to be great. We didn't think he was going to be as great as he turned out to be.
He was a star in college, Seth. People knew who he was.
Russell was the second overall pick, believe it or not, but he had won back-to-back collegiate championships and a gold. But we knew these people. Well, I mean, I didn't know Bill Russell because I wasn't born yet, but we knew who these guys were when they came into the league. And, the only one that maybe held the mantle as best player in the world for a short period of time, and I don't think he really ever held it, was maybe Kobe. But Kobe was the 13th overall pick. But we kind of saw right away he was going to be pretty good. This guy was a mid-first round pick.
Again, he was the best high school player in the country.
Right, he was a prodigy.
And his dad played in the NBA. Right. Like, people knew who he was. If he had gone to college, he would have ended up being the number one pick in the draft.
Exactly. If he went for 1 year. Yeah, if he went for 1 year at Duke, which is where he was going to go. He would have. So Jerry West just raved about him.
People still didn't know how to evaluate the high school guys in 1996 when Kobe was drafted.
Yep.
They didn't.
Look at Garnett the year before was the 5th pick. Yeah. In the first round of 1995. So you look at that and say it's a little bit different. So this guy is now the best player in the world, and he was he 15th overall pick?
Yeah, something like that.
Olenek was 13th, which,
you
just scratch your head on that one. But you know what? Danny Ainge was not the only guy that was wrong.
Yeah, 15th.
Someone besides Giannis. So 15th overall, and he's the best player in the world. You don't generally see that in the NBA. Again, Brady is the most incredible story because 199, wasn't always the starter in college, sat his rookie year, got in when Bledsoe got hurt. It was like, okay, what's this guy going to do when, 21 years later, he's still winning Super Bowls. It's still the most amazing story in American sports history, as far as I'm concerned, and just how long it's been. It's just unfathomable. But even you look at a golfer, Tiger Woods was a prodigy, maybe the most incredible prodigy ever. The guy was 3 years old on the Mike Douglas show golfing.
Right.
I mean, you kind of knew he was going to be awesome. With Giannis, it's like, people can't even say his last name.
Great point.
And it's Giannis to me. Or as my good friend John Saranides told me, the correct pronunciation in Greek is Giannis. So that's what I will refer to Giannis.
He doesn't seem to care what it is one way or the other, Giannis. I don't think he cares what people.
He just wants to win.
Pronouncing his name correctly, whatever. He doesn't give a damn.
Even yesterday when people started to boo him, it's not the same vitriol as Kyrie.
No, it's half-hearted.
Because it's almost like, yeah, this guy's pretty cool. He's just a good guy. And like, I don't know. I just give
the only reason to boo him is because he's decimating your team.
Right. Yeah. He's just, going through like Aaron Donald through an offensive line. And again, he just has a likability factor, and people complain that NBA players are prima donnas, right? I mean, that's like one of the biggest complaints you hear. This guy's anything but, right? I mean, he plays like every game. He's not holding out for contracts or threatening to go elsewhere, and he's not going to the front office and go and get my friend on the team. He just goes and plays basketball and does it better than anybody right now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, I mean, that was longer than I thought we were going to talk about Giannis, but I think it's worthwhile because, again,
he's worth it.
People are just need to just accept it. It's a truth. It's a universal truth right now. He's the best player in the world. Let's move on to the next series. That had a game one. This was after the Celtics game. It was a much more competitive game, especially towards the end. Golden State ends up squeaking by the Memphis Grizzlies, 117-116 in Memphis. So both the road teams win on their first game. Sap. The biggest story from this one is the Draymond Green ejection. So let's just start with that then, Sap. Did that foul, flagrant, warrant an ejection?
For most players, no. For Draymond, that's what's going to happen. And look, we both love Draymond. I think he's one of my favorite players in the league. because he's the ultimate glue guy, and also the fact that he's just, I think, one of the most interesting guys in the league. He's got his podcast. He's going to be already done broadcasting with TNT. He's just a very interesting guy, and I liked him at Michigan State. But I think if someone else had done that, probably wouldn't be an ejection, wouldn't be a flagrant two. With Draymond, he does have the reputation of doing this, has been ejected from games, has been suspended for games. I don't think he's going to get a suspension leading into game 2, but he did get ejected. So with him, I kind of understand where it went. I don't think it was warranted to get ejected, but because it's Draymond Green, seems to be a different set of rules. It's almost like Brad Marchand with the Boston Bruins. When he does something, it's time to suspend him because of his
reputation thing. Yeah,
it's a reputation thing. Absolutely. Same thing in football. Rodney Harrison was the most fine guy in the history of the NFL because he was a repeat offender, and that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that if you look at it, it looked a lot worse than it actually was because, the jersey looks like it's being like ripped up. But I think the thing with the jersey was, I think it was just purely him trying to keep him held upright. I don't think it was him trying to do something malicious. Definitely a flagrant foul. I have no problem with that call. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't think another player is ejected for it. And, Draymond Green said as much, it's a reputation thing, but part of that is you have to look at yourself too and be like, well, you earned the reputation. So it's, it is the official's fault, but it's also Draymond's fault too, because it's gotten to this point where he's earned the reputation. So the Warriors seem to use it as a rallying cry, and it ended up working out for them. This is what I've come to think now, watching the Warriors throughout the first round, and I watched them a couple games in the regular season too. I think Poole might be their second best player, Sap.
He's amazing.
I think he's surpassed Klay Thompson, and it's hard to say where Draymond Green is on the hierarchy. They're not good without him, but when he comes in, it's not like he puts up eye-popping stats all the time. They seem to trust Jordan Poole to do a little bit of everything and to be able to score 20, 25. Last night he had 31 points. I think he's surpassed Klay at this point.
He probably has. Again, we'll know more next year when Klay's fully recovered and back engaged, because he had 2 major injuries that had him out for 2 full years. So he's looked better and hit a big shot at the end, but then missed a couple of foul shots, which gave Memphis a chance to win that game. But Jordan Poole is just one of the most amazing stories. I mean, I know John Morant was the most improved player in the league. You can make a case Jordan Poole was, right? I mean,
that's who I voted for.
That was a good
when
choice.
We did our thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's just sensational, and you're right. And again, I think it still goes back to Steph Curry, who is the ultimate leader in that sport, along with the likes of Giannis and LeBron, who, they set the tone for their team. Heck, Steph Curry was coming off the bench early in the playoffs. What other superstars doing that?
Right.
And now they trust Jordan Poole. You got Klay Thompson, and I think they just work so well together. There doesn't seem to be much in the way of any kind of egos among those guys. And look, they're basketball players, and Steph's an all-time great, and I think Klay's a Hall of Famer. So they have egos. You can get to that point by being all shucks all the time. But yeah, it just seems to me like they absolutely trust the player. And again, kudos to them because they do draft well and develop well. And that to me is still something that's important in the NBA. Look at the Milwaukee Bucks. I know we talked about them for 35 minutes, and a lot of it was Giannis. The Milwaukee Bucks don't have a bunch of high draft picks. I mean, and a lot of those guys played on other teams. They kind of put it together. As we said, Giannis was the 15th overall pick. Holiday was a mid-first rounder. Middleton was a second rounder who they got in a trade from Detroit. So meanwhile, Brooklyn's got a bunch of guys who were first overall picks, and Durant was the second overall pick. And those guys seem to be entitled. Golden State understands how to draft and develop players really well. And you see that example of Jordan Poole. Look, they're going to be tough to beat because at the end of games, they know how to get it done. And Memphis, I don't know if there's a mandate in Memphis that they have to trail by 10 points going into every fourth quarter.
Right, yeah.
That was the case against Minnesota. They were outscored the first 3 quarters of the 6 games against Minnesota by 62 points. They were behind in every game. If Minnesota was more buttoned up, it would be Minnesota playing Golden State. But Minnesota made a lot of mistakes down the stretch, and Memphis made them pay for it. Golden State's not going to let that happen.
Yeah, that's why I think, Memphis is going to really let this regret that this loss because, one, it's on their home court. They lost by a point. And I, you just can't afford to give a team that has so much experience and talent like Golden State, an opening. Memphis really needed to put the pressure on them by taking game one. And, they got an outstanding performance from Jaren Jackson Jr., who's not always consistent. Morant was really good. 34, 9, and 10. They didn't get the game they needed from Bane. He shot 3 of 10 from the floor, which for him is not very good. Dylan Brooks was even worse, 3 of 13 from the floor. So that hurt them too. But again, there's just so little margin for error for Memphis because they don't have, other than Morant, that elite level of talent. And Golden State does. And Golden State obviously has been here a million times. They know what it takes to win. So, these close games, if Memphis is going to lose these close games, that's really a huge killer for them because those are the games they need. They needed game one to set the tone in this series.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real issue. Jaren Jackson Jr. was 6 of 9 from 3, which is phenomenal. So you kind of wasted that on a loss. Although as he's hitting those shots, he doesn't know they're going to lose. Desmond Bane's a guy that will step up bigger in game 2 because he had a great series against Minnesota. So he's going to have to be that second scorer to Ja Morant, and he certainly can handle that. Once Memphis is able to get maybe a second star, maybe through free agency, because they have one of the richest owners in the NBA and a really good culture and a pretty cool city in Memphis, maybe they're able to attract, maybe not a high-level free agent, but a really good player to be the number 2 guy to Ja Morant, then they'll be that much better. But, when you come down the stretch, that experience does mean a lot. And Golden State's got that championship DNA, and they exhibited it yesterday. And look, Ja did what he does. Ja Morant is a phenomenal player, and he is certainly ready, willing, and able to take the big shots. He doesn't shy away from it at all. And, it was kind of an awkward looking shot. He's ambidextrous. He's good going either way, but it seemed like he was a little too far out to try to do that little scoop flip shot. And it really never came close. I mean, his elevation ability, he could get to the rim probably a little closer and maybe make a better attempt. But look, who am I to, criticize Ja because he's been one of the best players in this league and a total joy to watch. But I think he could have maybe had a slightly better attempt than what he did.
Well, maybe too, if Brooks or Bane had a better shooting night, maybe he trusts them to make that, a last shot, and he's not so content to try to do it all himself. So I think maybe that had something to do with it too. But Golden State's gonna be tough to take out. They just are, and I don't know that Memphis has the personnel to be able to do it. I think we all see a Suns Warriors conference finals is kind of inevitable. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that. Those to me were the 2 best teams in the West, even though Memphis finished with a better record than them. The West seemed less wide open than the East. So I do think Phoenix is equipped to take out Golden State. I think Memphis will be able to win a game or 2 in this series because they're pesky and they're not going to give up if they get down, even if they go down 3-0, which I don't think will happen. I still think they'd win, they'd be able to win a game or 2. Golden State's they're deep. They're so deep and they know how to win.
Yeah. I mean, again, when you got a great leader in Steph, you got Clay's got all that experience. Even though Draymond gets ejected, they just keep coming back with players that go out there. And that doesn't even mention some of the young guys they have. I think Jonathan Kuminga is going to be a really good player. He's so raw right now, but their future is so bright. I mean, it's a well-run organization. It's not by accident that they've won 3 championships in the last 7 years. And I expect them to be right there against Phoenix in the Western Conference Finals, which will be fascinating because Chris Paul's always had trouble breaking through Golden State. Maybe now he has the team that's equipped to do that. Yeah.
Sap, last thing I want to talk about before we wrap up here. We already previewed the other 2 series that are happening starting off tonight, Philadelphia, Miami, and Dallas, Phoenix. So we're not going to give you your thoughts on those series, but since we last did a show, major news in the NBA is that Joel Embiid is going to be out at least 2 games with mild concussion and an orbital fracture. It happened at the end of their blowout win over Toronto to ice the series. They were up 29, I think, at that point, Seth. So a lot of pushback on Doc Rivers. Why the hell was he in the game at that point? It obviously changes the complexion of the series massively. We're talking about the best player in that series. I think he will come back in this series and wear a mask. but man, we talked about James Harden having a lot of pressure on him before this. Look at it now.
Oh, he's going to have to go out and score 35, right? He's going to have to make up for what they're going to lose without Embiid, who's going to miss the first 2 games. And even when he comes back, Jet, that's a serious injury. That's like a football injury or whatever. And then he's also dealing with a thumb. So here's a guy who's got multiple injuries. And look, as we talked exactly, and again, he's a big physical guy who always seems to be falling. And, I don't know how long his career is going to be. And he's a wonderful player to watch and a joy off the court because he's got an incredible personality. And again, we talked about Doc Rivers last week when Philly was up 3-0, and then it was 3-2, and he was pushing back about how many big leads he's blown in the postseason. And I love Doc. I don't know if you love him as much as I do, because a lot of Celtics fans kind of push back that he kind of abandoned the team when it was time to rebuild. But I love Doc. But again, what is Joel Embiid doing on the court with 4 minutes left and a 29-point lead, other than in Doc's mind, because he's blown 3-3-1 leads in the postseason and 3-3-2 leads in the postseason. He's like, I got to make sure I win this game because I've lost the last 2. I can't possibly end up in a game 7. I think it would be difficult to lose a 29-point lead with 4 minutes left, right? I mean, I think that would almost be impossible. They'd have to hit 10 threes over a 4-minute period, and you'd have to go scoreless, and you'd lose by 1. I don't even know if that's physically, statistically possible, but maybe it is. But he's got to get him off the court because, the guy's beat up. And then Siakam elbows him. Now we've got the fractured orbital and also the mild concussion. So he's going to miss the first 2 games. I mean, maybe Philly steals one. James Harden goes in the Wayback Machine and has a 35, 10, and 15 game, and Tyrese Maxey has a huge game. But that's not the team you want to try to do that against in a really tough, physical, good defensive team like the Miami Heat. The only thing is that Kyle Lowry will be out for at least game 1. So maybe Philly steals one and makes a series of it. But I think it obviously favors Miami. They're healthier than Philadelphia because Philadelphia's best player is out. That's going to be a tough thing to overcome.
And Sap, when he comes back, because again, I think you agree. Do you think he's going to come back in this series?
Oh, sure. Yeah, he'll come back probably in game 3 because I guess it's more about the concussion and how he can deal with wearing a mask.
Right. Okay, so we both agree he's going to come back. But here's the problem for Philadelphia, too. Miami has no problem being super physical with him. No. They don't care. They don't care that he's got a bad thumb or is wearing the face mask. Like, they're going to rough him up. So it's going to be even harder for him too. Like, I think our friend Kendrick Perkins calls them, the goons from South Beach or Dade County. Yep. They are. And so they will, I don't think they have a problem giving him an elbow in the thumb, an elbow in the chops. Like, they'll take advantage of it too. Like, that's not the team you want to know that you don't want them to know you're injured.
No,
they'll take advantage of it too.
Pat Riley will be getting all the information out. Pat Riley's, a guy who, look, he's won at every level, at every place he's gone. Yeah, they'll be cognizant of all that, especially even the thumb injury, because that's something that's not going to be right till the offseason. And
no, they're going to smack that thumb
sure.
once or twice. Sure,
yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Butler, and if Kyle Lowry comes back, those 2 guys are all about winning. And Bam's an outstanding player, and they'll bring some guys off the bench to get physical with Embiid. And
PJ Tucker is no problem doing that.
There you go.
Dirty work. Yeah.
I keep forgetting he's on that team because he was so good with Milwaukee last year.
He's such a good fit on this team too.
He's perfect. Remember in the offseason was like they got Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker. I mean, wow. I mean, how could you beat that? Those are like 2 guys that are perfect for the Miami Heat, perfect with Jimmy Butler. It's going to be tough for Philadelphia without Embiid. That's not exactly a hot take. Can Harden step up and maybe steal one of these first 2 games? I mean, he's still got it in him. It's just not there as often as it used to be. And let's face facts, the guy has struggled in the postseason, even when he was winning an MVP and was in the discussion as one of the 5 best players in the league, which he no longer was in that discussion. But, he's still a talented guy that can maybe have a big game. And I think people are overlooking the fact that Kyle Lowry is going to be out. And he's a key contributor.
That's a good
for
point.
The Heat. Yeah, I mean, that's a I mean, I'm just thinking.
But they're just like such a next man up team, I feel like. So it's a big deal because he's some games he's their best player.
I mean, they're the one team that's left that you look at it and go, who's their best player? I mean, I would think it's Jimmy Butler, but you can make a case it's Bam Adebayo, right? I mean, Bam's right there too, and Kyle Lowry's got championship DNA. And oh, by the way, Tyler Hero's probably going to be 6th man of the year. So I mean, you got not that Hero's the best player on the team, but you get my point. He's a key contributor. They're a true ensemble, kind of like Phoenix, right? They're both ensembles, although Chris Paul's the Hall of Famer, all-time great, and Booker's maybe the best player on the team and is going to be an MVP candidate. Ayton's outstanding, but those are the teams that they don't really have a hierarchy. With Milwaukee, it's clearly Giannis, followed by now, Drew Holiday, because Middleton's not there. And, obviously Luka's by far the best player on Dallas, and Steph's still the best player on Golden State, and Ja by leaps and bounds is the best player on Memphis. And if you go to Boston, we're all in agreement, Jason Tatum's their best player. But
absolutely,
Miami and Phoenix are the two teams that who's their best player? You can have a discussion on that. And that's what makes those teams dangerous, because there's not as much pressure on that, great player. There is pressure on Jason Tatum to play better in game 2 or whatever. So that's going to be interesting to see. Again, comes down, can Harden do it? And again, Tyrese Maxey is quite capable of stepping up and putting up 32 points and being very efficient at doing it.
Yeah. So we'll have to see. Obviously, the Embiid injury, we're going to keep a close eye on, and we expect him to be back either game 3 or game 4. Knowing him, it'll be game 3. But we'll have to see how much it affects him. I'm assuming he has to wear a mask. He's got the broken bone in his face. We'll see if that affects him too. Sometimes with big guys, that slows you down a little bit, harder to breathe with the mask. So a lot of stuff going into that, but they are going to be without him tonight in game 1. And we didn't even talk about the Phoenix Dallas series. We'll talk about that. We'll react to that after game 1 happens, because those teams are both healthy right now. That's going to do it, Sap, for us here at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, where we are firmly on the stance of Giannis is the best basketball player in the world, that everybody should just admit it. I think we were on it first, Sap, so credit to us.
Yes.
I think we deserve the nice pat on the back there. But yeah, you can find our podcast wherever podcasts are found. And check out our social medias at JohnSapp25, at Jet Stryer. You can check out the YouTube version of this show at youtube.com/Jet Stryer. Thanks, full press coverage. And we'll be back later in the week with some more playoff news, playoff reaction, all that good stuff. So talk to you then everybody. See ya.